Welcome to the Hud Grad Club. I'm Chris Webb, and I'm the Alumni Engagement Career Consultant with the University of Huddersfield's Careers Employability Service. And, full disclosure, I'm also a University of Huddersfield graduate. So I've generally got pretty positive things to say about both the institution and any of our graduates. But don't take my word for it. In this podcast, we'll be meeting different members of the University of Huddersfield's global alumni community, finding out what makes them tick, about their experiences during their time at the university and their career journeys since completing their studies. Join us as we explore the inspiring, innovative and diverse range of individuals that make up the Hud Grad Club. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hud Grad Club, our podcast celebrating the University of Huddersfield alumni community. And Matt, a very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you for asking me. Pleasure to do it.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And we kind of, just before we sort of get into everything as part of the podcast episode, I guess for people that maybe don't know you or haven't come across you before or your kind of career journey, can you tell us just a little bit more about what you studied at the university and what you're up to
now? So I studied music. I did a BMus. I was there 2000 to 2003, which, yikes, yeah, it's 20 years ago. So, yeah, loved it. I ended up, I did that thing of studying what I was interested in, not giving a huge amount of thought to the career I might have. And we can dig into that if you want in a bit. But then, yeah, got a huge amount out of it, loved being there, made some absolutely brilliant friends, some dear friends. Actually, I'm seeing the group I've kept in touch with for a union next weekend, actually. So that's going to be fun.
Let's start on that point of good memories, I guess. And we kind of kick off the podcast usually each time with our greatest Hud story section, which is all about, special memories from your time at the university or kind of key things that happened that have really sort of stuck with you. So you mentioned there about, particularly, I guess, university being a great time to make contacts, people that you're still with now, great friends. What are some of, I guess, the sort of special memories from your time at the university?
I mean, this might be a bit corny, but before I got to uni, I didn't really consider myself someone who was particularly accomplished at anything. Obviously was good enough to get in, was a good enough musician to get in to do the degree. But I just found the whole place so the music department at the time, I just found it really inspiring. And the teachers there, and it really was. I was so glad I went to uni at Huddersfield, because I nearly didn't go to uni at all. And just, yeah, it kind of changed me, really. I suddenly started to believe in myself a bit, and that was fantastic. And as I said, thinking about specific memories, it's hard to bring to mind, but I remember laughing a lot, having some, just really, really enjoying the studying and the social side. As I said, made some amazing friends and had some, fairly mad house parties on Blacker Road. I don't know what Blacker Road's like now, but it was, yeah, we had fun there. So yeah, had a good time from both ends of the spectrum, really. Felt like I learned a lot. It set me up really for the next few moves, and made some lifelong friendships, really. So
I think like you said, it's kind of the path you trod there, I guess, is probably very familiar to a lot of people who've been to university, maybe following something that you've got a bit of a passion for, but not really being sure where it kind of might take you afterwards. So let's kind of dig into that a little bit more. What was that journey like then? You came to kind of study music. Did that sort of lead directly on to a career in that field? And where has that kind of taken you up to now?
Yeah, so when I left Huddersfield, I registered self-employed. I did some playing, lots of different types of playing and teaching. And I studied classical guitar, but played, jazz and electric guitar and other bits and pieces. So I kind of did all sorts, really. And then I ended up actually doing a master's over at Manchester at the Royal Northern College of Music there, which was also formative, in a different way. And and then at that time was working and studying pretty evenly. And then, yeah, I just worked as a musician for a bit and a music teacher for a few years, moved to Germany for a bit because of the girlfriend at the time, and was working as a musician and kind of teacher out there. And then kind of got to a point where, if I'm going to be completely honest, I got to a point where I felt like I was working loads and I was kind of at the ceiling of what I could earn, is what I felt. And I made the decision to, not that life's, not that it's all about money, but I felt a little bit like, if I could work more and make a bit more money, I would. But it was literally like teaching all day, rehearsing in the evening, playing in the evening, this, that, and the other, going all over the place at weekends to play and do this, that, and the other. So it was, I thought maybe I'll have a breather and do something else. And I'd moved back to the UK by this point and saw a job with an orchestra in Manchester, and it was kind of looking after their friends and supporters. I mean, I don't know how many of people watching this will know, but lots of arts organisations, they're part funded by the Arts Council, and a lot of them get a little bit of funding from, their local council as well, but they have to make the rest up, and a big chunk of it is fundraising. So like sponsors, individuals that give a few quid or a lot more, and grants and things like that. So there was a job coming up in that field, and I applied, and I think because I'd done classical music, at Huddersfield and Manchester, and it was an entry level job, but I got it, and I just loved it. You're meeting people that are really passionate about the art form. A lot of the time know more than you. They want the arts to exist, so that's why they're involved. And I just was kind of sucked in, really. And throughout my career, I went from there to Leeds College of Music, and then I went to South Bank Centre in London, and then the Royal Shakespeare Company, and then ended up where I am now, which is Director of Development at Birmingham Royal Ballet. So I've kind of gone along, been really lucky to go through, to do it in music and education and theatre and visual art and now ballet.
Do you think that's sort of a route that maybe, I guess, kind of music graduates aren't always so familiar with? Because, as you sort of said there, I think it sounds like it was something that you kind of sort of fell into, or the opportunity kind of came up at the right time, but it sounds like it was something that you got a huge amount of value out of and allowed you to kind of stay in touch with the arts, but probably in a slightly different way to what you'd expected when you first graduated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a surprising number of fundraisers that are in the arts that have done music as opposed to other art forms. And a lot of the really brilliant fundraisers that I've worked with through my career have all been musicians as well. There's this kind of weird thing about it. And you're quite right. I mean, when I applied for that first job, I didn't really understand what the job was. But I think, musicians, I mean, generalization, but I think they're curious people. I think, they've already got that passion for the art form. And they're usually sociable people. That helps you get on in both. If you're going out as a musician, it helps to be sociable. People will want to work with you if you're a nice person to be around. And I think when you're doing what's called development, when you're fundraising in the arts, a huge part of it is you've got to genuinely be interested in the people you're meeting, these funders. And I think, so yeah, it's interesting. I think that is definitely, and I would encourage any graduate, not just music graduates, to consider it as a career, because, I find it satisfying. And also I've had some amazing opportunities. I've worked all over the world at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I did the fundraising was one of the team that did fundraising in New York, as well as in Washington and the UK, London, and some fundraising projects over in China as well. And the bigger arts organizations, that's what you get, and another part of the career, which I think, again, I didn't know beforehand, but which has been enjoyable, is that you become a conduit between the funders and the art form. And, when you get someone giving a huge amount of money to the art form, you're then the person. So, for instance, at the Royal Shakespeare Company, someone gives a big chunk of money, and then they have dinner with David Tennant or whoever it might be, and you're the person doing the introductions, and you're there at the dinner as well, and you're making sure it's all going okay. So I've kind of, I think not a lot of people associate that with the career, but there's a huge amount of that. You get to see some amazing things for free. You get to travel.
I mean, it's a really, really interesting kind of area, and I think you're absolutely right. And maybe speaks to some of the stuff that we sort of try and communicate sometimes as a careers service, which is this idea of, are there kind of broad areas of interest that you want to be involved in, and what sort of maybe problems exist in those areas that need solving. So, like you said, for example, in the arts, always kind of an underfunded area, always somewhere where more money's needed. There's always that risk of, if it doesn't get money, that we see some of these things disappear, which is such a massive part of our culture and day-to-day life. And I think, as you say, for some people, they might not think about that and think, oh, actually, there's probably roles within there that would allow me to really kind of pursue my passion for keeping the arts going and funding it, all those sort of things. So I think it's a really interesting example of, how you can do that. Is that something that you're taking forward now? So you mentioned that obviously you're kind of director of development at Birmingham Royal Ballet. Is that sort of a role that is kind of quite similar to some of those previous ones you've done, or is it kind of slightly different?
It is. It's a bigger role. It's kind of looking after a whole department, and there's a big target there, and I kind of look after a team of people. But I am. It's been a very interesting job there. And when I joined, for anyone that knows about ballet, I mean, I didn't particularly before I joined. This is another great thing about being a fundraiser is I've worked in, a contemporary art gallery and for an orchestra and for a theatre and now a dance company. So I'm kind of learning all the time as well. And the guy that heads up the company who joined when I joined is this guy called Carlos Acosta, who, if you know ballet, he's this absolute superstar. Born in the slums in Havana, Cuba, became first Black principal dancer of the Royal Ballet. Wow. A superstar in ballet, really. And so it was a real coup for Birmingham Royal Ballet to get him. So it's been great. It's been really, really exciting and interesting. But I'm actually now coming to the end. I'm stepping away from this role and I'm going out as a consultant.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm going out as a consultant, and what I'm going to do is, I feel very fortunate because I can do this now, and I'm starting to do more music again. So I'm going to try and combine both. I'm going to try and go back because I miss it. I've done fundraising for, I don't know, 15 years now, and so I want to go back and do a bit of music. So that's kind of where I am now.
Wow, fantastic. And I mean, so the consultancy side is going to be within what you've been doing around the fundraising, and then the music is going to be, you pursuing your own.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the consultancy thing actually is, again, I feel very fortunate to be in a position where I can do it and people want, to employ me to do a bit of it. But it's been already, I'm kind of phasing out at BRB and started picking up some consultancy already. And there's been one with a food bank charity, which has been hugely satisfying, doing some stuff for them. And one with a festival. There's one piece of work I'm about to do for a castle in Wales that need a bit of fundraising support. So again, I think it's kind of just feel very lucky because I'm now in a position where I've got lots of variety in my life, my professional life, and I totally respect people that go into a career and what they want is stability and regularity, and but I've also been someone who likes to learn and likes to do new things. So it's
And was that sort of what prompted the move for you? Was it that sort of desire for more variety, or as you said, were there kind of other factors in there about that, I guess, prompted you to go back to music, having had some time away?
A multitude of factors, really. It was a big job, very big job. So lots of evening work and working weekends and occasionally, not that I'm an advocate at all of that. And I was quite strict with my team that, really didn't want them to be doing that. I wasn't trying to kind of set a culture. It was just, that's part of the role. I've also got a young family, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So it was kind of wanting to carve out a bit of time for myself and them. And a couple of friends of mine who are also really, really brilliant fundraisers had decided to go out on their own. And we kind of had this joint discussion as to, we were kind of encouraging each other, like, let's just do it. Let's just see what happens. And it's, we've all, they've picked up loads of work. There seems to be opportunities out there. So yeah, that's why I'm moving on. But I do with a heavy heart as well. I've met some brilliant people up there and had some, really, really good experiences. So,
I mean, as you say, it's almost sometimes it's having people to kind of give you permission, isn't it? Or feeling like you've got permission to make those moves, and easier, I guess, when you've got people in a similar kind of stage of their career or taking the leap at the same time. I mean, interesting as well, I guess, what you've said there about the assessing, I suppose, some of the factors that are really important to you. I mean, do you think that's one of those things that's kind of quite hard to do at the start of your career? You kind of, before you've got that idea, I guess, what work is like and maybe what things you really want to take from work, whether it's stability, variety, being able to use creativity, having kind of independence, autonomy, those sort of things. Do you think it's the sort of thing that we can kind of only really start to work out a bit more once we've had a bit of time in work?
I think so, unfortunately. But I think it is super important. I think a key moment for me in my career is when I went in fundraising, is when I went to South Bank Centre in London, because it was such an exciting place to be at the time. There was a brilliant team there. I'd gone from working in this really small, me and one other person at Leeds College of Music, to a place where there was 30 fundraisers all raising millions of pounds. And it was just the defining thing really was that it was so much fun. Everyone there was really passionate about it and worked hard, but also it was a great environment to be in. So I think up until that point, I hadn't really realized that work could be like that. I got satisfaction out of doing it, but I hadn't kind of had fun. And that's something I tried to bring into being one of the directors at BRB with my team. There is to, I wanted to lead by example and for there to be a strong work ethic, but also wanted people to, enjoy being in the office and to, for everyone to kind of be considerate of each other and kind to each other and make space for people to be themselves and to have fun and to, have social times together. And thankfully, I think that happened. It was a happy team. So.
It leads really nicely actually into a question we kind of tend to ask in each podcast, which is around, I guess, key influences. And you've mentioned a bit there around influences that have kind of impacted on your leadership style, or how you wanted a workplace environment to feel and those sort of things. Have there been, I guess, any sort of key figures during your career, which has been, as you said, kind of quite windy, quite squiggly, which is quite typical for many people's careers? Have there been sort of, I guess, key figures or key people in there that have been a real sort of inspiration to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd go back like pre-career as well. Like again, to look back to how it felt to come to Huddersfield Uni and how it was kind of a confidence boost because of how I was treated there and the kind of teaching setup. And the guitar teacher at the time, David Taplin, who's sadly no longer with us, was such a huge relationship in my life. He was very, very interested, encouraging, and I kind of, it was a huge influence on me. And he also was someone that had pursued a passion and wasn't a materialistic guy. He wanted his life to be doing something he loved. And I think corny, cheesy, overused advice, but I definitely 100% subscribe to that. Think, your working life is such a huge amount of time out of your life. I think don't set up as something that's making you miserable. It is quite hair-raising stepping away from a job or, as you say, taking a leap and doing something else. But my advice would be do it every time. I think you've got to, your whole life improves if your work life improves, in my opinion. So
It's such a central part, isn't it? I think there's often not enough recognition given. There's, as you say, lots of kind of, we talk an awful lot about, work and the impact it has on people, but actually in terms of kind of a pure breakdown of time and just how much of your life you are spending in a kind of as least depressing way possible, as you say, it's a huge chunk, isn't it? And the influence it has on how you feel when you get home and your relationships in your personal life and your professional life, it's that impact is so seismic that you're right. You kind of really do have to feel quite carefully or think quite carefully about, what that's going to look like. I mean, some good advice there, as you said, kind of more generally. I mean, that'd be interesting to hear based on what you've sort of mentioned today. I guess for other music graduates who are sort of coming through, your career's been, as you said, quite experimental. You've gone out there, you've sort of tried some of the performance aspects, you've, weighed up, I guess, and considered where that was making you feel good, where it wasn't making you feel so good. You've taken kind of adjacent pathways. You're now looking to do something kind of different and return back to music. I guess from your sort of time so far and your experience so far, are there kind of any particular nuggets of advice or wisdom for music graduates in particular that you think might be worth sharing on the podcast?
Yeah, excuse me. I mean, this might be applicable to other graduates as well, but I think one of the things I would really I'd advise is like the power of a coffee, really shouting someone a coffee or a tea or whatever it might be. I mean, people like talking about themselves, as I do. That's why I've agreed to do this. But I think if there's a sector you want to work in or an organization you want to work for or whatever it might be, I think reach out to them and just shout someone a coffee and say, look, I love this organization. I'm pursuing a career in this field. I'd be so pleased, I'd be so grateful if you might meet for a coffee and tell me what it's like. And I think you'd be amazed how often people want to help. I find that most people like helping other people. And I think obviously if you're going into a job, you've got to go through the right process, but people will help flag things for you and give you advice. And I just spent a huge amount of time. I still do actually, shouting people coffees. And through COVID, when I was working at home, I was constantly shouting people I admired, people from organizations I thought were great. Just, hey, if you fancy doing an online coffee, just half an hour, it'd be great to hear how you're getting through this, what you're up to. And I suppose networking is what I'm talking about, but specifically
actually, the way you framed that, I think, is just much more appealing than the term networking. And we've talked about this on some previous episodes of the podcast. And we often say within the career service how networking has got a lot of baggage attached to it as a term. It kind of conjures up sometimes quite negative imagery for people, or quite can be quite anxiety inducing. So I think the way you frame that around, you're just reaching out to somebody, you're just asking to go for a coffee or have a coffee over Zoom or whatever, I think is a much kind of more easily accessible entry point into the idea of networking, rather than go to a networking event, which can feel quite daunting or quite intimidating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think there's value in both, but I'm definitely in that camp of, I suppose I'm confident enough to go into an event and go up and talk to people, but I know some people aren't. And I know it's not, these days, I don't love going to networking events, mainly because 90% of my job is meeting new people and talking to them. But yeah, and I think also you can just be more targeted as well. As I said, like, look for organizations that you admire and that I'd love to work for Manchester International Festival or whoever it might be. And I just 99% of the time people will say, yeah, sounds good. Absolutely. Happy for you to buy me a coffee. Even if they don't make introductions for you, or, it's nearly always insightful. So.
No, absolutely great advice. I mean, this reminds me of that. There's a really nice Reid Hoffman quote about opportunities not being things that float in the sky. They're not clouds. They're attached to people. And each, if you're looking for an opportunity, you're actually looking for a person. And I think that it's that sort of thing we sometimes forget, that, whoever you're looking for, no matter how high up they are within their industry, ultimately they are just a person. And as you said, the vast majority of people generally do tend to be, in my experience too, very helpful. We get an endorphin boost out of helping people. So it's not entirely altruistic. So people want to do it, so it's a really, really good point. Matt, thanks so much. Brilliant to kind of hear your reflections from your career so far. I mean, if we've got sort of students or graduates who are watching the podcast or listening to the podcast and want to find out a little bit more about you and your career, where can they kind of find you in the Webbosphere?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn. They can find me on LinkedIn. But, if there's anyone who has watched this and wants to, do want to know more about kind of fundraising in the arts, you have my email. Please, feel free to pass it on. If they shout me a coffee, I will say yes.
That is what an offer. Now, the way to Matt's heart. So if you're watching the podcast, you'll see kind of coming up on the screen below, we'll ping up kind of Matt's LinkedIn details, so do check him out on there. And equally, if you're listening to the podcast, we'll put the details in the podcast notes. So yeah, the offer is there. Coffee is the secret to getting a meeting with Matt. So Matt, once again, thanks so much for joining us today, for sort of sharing your reflections on your career journey, and thank you for becoming the latest member of the Hud Grad Club. And obviously, we wish you well with the move into consultancy and the kind of musical journey sort of moving forward.
Thanks, Chris. A real pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye. Enjoyed the podcast? Then go to the University of Huddersfield YouTube channel for all of our future episodes. Subscribe, like, and don't forget to hit the bell button for notifications. If you'd like to be involved in the Hud Grad Club podcast moving forward, please get in touch with us on alumni@hud.ac.uk.